Hello, podcast world, fellow horticulturists, lovers of plants, gardeners, family, and friends. Welcome to Shrubby Buddies, the podcast, friends with woodies for garden goodies. I'm host Matt Guthrie.
And I'm host Tim Fleischer. Coming at you from Central Ohio, Zone 6B. We're just a couple of public horticulturists and certified arborists with experience in education, landscape design, gardening, retail, and wholesale.
So grab a drink, polish your pruners, dust off that kneeling pad, and let's get down to business. Hey, podcast world, plant lovers, horticulturists, hort nerds, whoever it is that's listening. Welcome to episode 8 of Shrubby Buddies, the podcast, with Matt and Timmy. Tim, how are you today?
I'm great, Matt. It's a beautiful day. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. It is a beautiful day out. Sky's blue, the temperature's just right. Not too hot, not too cool, low humidity, a little breeze in the air.
I love a good breeze.
I love a good breeze too. So, yeah, so here we are, episode 8.
Where are we?
Well, I was just getting into that. So this is a special episode. So far, our episodes have been either at Tim's place or my place, in kind of a quiet environment, you know, in a basement or in a bedroom or, you know.
Ooh la la.
Yeah, something like that. But today, so we're recording this on Saturday, a few days before it drops, but so it just so happened to be that we both found ourselves in northern Ohio on the same weekend, not too far from one another. So we decided that we would meet to record this broadcast at the Ohio Prairie Farmers, little slice of heaven up here in Northwest Ohio. So that's where we are, the Ohio Prairie Farmers place. That is Tim's father-in-law. And this is it's beautiful. It's everything and more than what you had described and shown me pictures of.
I couldn't agree more, and it's actually, looking around here, it's going to be hard to get back to a basement.
It really is.
To record.
So if we'll put some pictures on the gram. If you don't follow us and you're listening, give us a follow on the gram, Shrubby Buddies Podcast. But yeah, so I'll paint the picture for you a little bit. We are sitting on the front porch of the little house on the prairie. So it's a nice little house thing here that sits kind of on top of a hill with a nice pollinator kind of perennial border just off the front porch. And then we're overlooking several acres of prairie here that's kind of split into, what are we looking at? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 or 6 different plots here.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of these plots was planted with different seed mixes. A lot of this, very similar, but about 6 different meadows or prairies that we're looking at here.
I see a lot of penstemon.
Yeah, a lot of penstemon is currently flowering.
And the way it's swaying in the breeze.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just beautiful. This is a perfect place to record. But anyways, yeah, so 6 different prairies here. All of them doing a little something different. Each one of them was planted. It's kind of one of the grandchildren's prairies, so they each kind of have a name to them, which I think is a wonderful idea. And not to mention on the perimeter of the property, he's planted, a mix of native shrubs and things to kind of soften the edges of, the agricultural land that's kind of surrounding this. And
which is beautiful in itself.
It is,
but
yeah.
but will likely eventually be turned into residential. So it'll be nice to have that buffer.
Yeah, a little buffer here. And in the far right corner, I'm looking at, looks like a grouping of some red oaks, maybe a white oak in there.
Yeah.
I
think one of them's a bur oak.
Bur oak, yeah.
Big cottonwood.
So, and he's got a real nice savanna kind of edge planted all under those. Anyways, yeah, just a beautiful place to record.
Yeah, we'll have to post. We'll post a good number of pictures.
We'll have pictures probably of this prairie through the season too, because we're seeing it here early mid-season, and it's only going to get better as the season progresses. A lot of stuff when looking out here that's getting ready to really pop off. So yeah, a lot of the early season stuff's kind of finishing up out there, and some of the mid-season stuff starting to really come on strong. So I don't know what you're doing over there. You're like eating the microphone.
You always tell me to stay close, so.
Oh, that's close.
Okay.
You good?
Yeah.
Lubing?
Yeah. Can the listeners hear the birds?
Yeah. So we're outside. So if there's a little bit of a breeze sound to this, I don't apologize. If you hear the birds and that's annoying, I don't apologize. If you hear a plane fly over, I don't apologize for that either. So, yeah. Samesies. So what's other than, where we are right now, what's new in your world, Tim? Anything good?
Just pretty much finished up all my planting at work, and that feels really good to get that stuff in the ground, and most of it is stuff that thrives in dry areas. So I'm just happy that I don't have to worry about the watering too much right now. We had a good rain, and I'm just feeling good about how things fell into place, and glad to have that stuff out of the hoop house and into the ground. And
yeah, it always feels good when you can kind of wipe your hands of that stuff for the season and
then watch it grow.
Yeah, I always get anxious. I'm a very impatient person, so I get it in the ground.
You are?
And I am, and I just want it to be 2 years from now, so I can kind of see it. I mean, I appreciate what it does in the meantime, but
well, don't ever wish time away.
I know.
That's something my mom always says.
Yep, old Debbie.
Yep.
That's what she says.
Shout out to Debbie.
Debbie Fleischer in the house. So yeah, new with me, not a whole lot. Samesies on the getting stuff in the ground. Kind of wrapped up with that. I think at my house, I'm pretty much wrapped up with the little bit that I did this spring. I may add or edit some stuff here or there as the season progresses. But, yeah, just going to kind of sit back now and go into autopilot mode, water when needed. Deadhead, do a little maintenance as needed. You're taking selfies right now while I'm talking. And watch the annuals, that I have in pots and in the ground and stuff start to do their thing as we get into the summer here. Yeah, so not a whole lot new here. Just, same old, same old.
So what's on tap for today's episode, Matt?
All right, today's episode title, Garden Intervention. Time to sit down with your garden and have a little talk about life and help get its life back in order as we move into the summer months. So so this episode we're going to be talking about plants that could be sheared, to help create maybe a more compact plant, stuff that maybe would flop through the season. Maybe you don't have stuff supporting it in the garden to kind of help keep it standing upright. So plants that you could shear back now to kind of promote that, maybe stronger stems, shorter, sturdier plant. Also some things that we could be deadheading right now, just to help encourage maybe better flowers or a flush of new foliage growth or something like that. Or maybe it's just some shrubs that are finished blooming for the season that now would be a good time to to prune those back and kind of get them back into check, back into order, bring them down in size a little bit. So, yeah.
What's funny is a short month ago, I was, would look out to my garden and think, there's nothing to do there. Just let it grow.
Let it exist.
And now you're looking out thinking, man, I need to intervene a little bit there. And I think we often use markers for when we should do things in the garden. Like, for example, it's kind of a common thought when the forsythia is blooming is when to get down your pre-emergent, something like that. And I always use when the service berries are ripening as kind of the time for that first intervention. It always kind of reminds me that it's probably time to get in there and cut some things back and deadhead some things and just tidy up the gardens a little bit. And a lot of this is just for looks. It's not because it has to be that way. If you don't want to do, if you're going full on natural and you don't mind things that are going to reseed like crazy and you don't mind things that maybe
flop a little
or don't look that great in seed, but then leave it. But this is if you're trying to keep things tidy along the way, you have to kind of do this in phases, and this is phase one.
Yeah, phase one.
So
kind of we were talking a little bit ago, like that early mid-season. I don't want to say mid-season. I would think of that as more like July, August would be like the middle of the season. You have your early season stuff, March, April, even into May. You start getting around like June 1st, and there's some things that have kind of had their show for the year that might need some a little bit of attention. And
last week of May into the first week or two of June.
Yeah, I always think like June 1, I guess. And we can start off right now with one of the things that I always do is with some of my goldenrods that get floppy, that solar cascade goldenrod is one.
Fireworks is another.
Some of the ones that get kind of tall, if you don't have things in the garden that they're kind of growing and coexisting with to kind of help keep them standing upright, a lot of times they'll flop by the end of the year. So I always look at June 1. I'm going to go in and I'm going to shear those goldenrods back to the, not all the way to the ground, but I've played around with different heights and have gotten pretty much the same result. I've done knee high, shin high this year. I think I took them back to like, 6 or 8 inches off the ground. I mean, I cut them back hard.
You and me both. I might have even gone a little bit more than that because I've played around with some different heights, and I thought this year is the year I'm just going to go for it. And I think I did like 4 inches.
Yeah, so I took the goldenrods way back, but it really helps sturdy that plant up for when they flower late in the year. Doing it now, you're still going to get plenty of new growth that's going to set those flower buds. It's not going to be an issue. It's not like you're going to cut that now and it not flower, this fall.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Matt mentioned goldenrods. There's a number of plants in this category that are going to bloom late, so they haven't put out any flower buds yet. So all you're doing essentially is taking maybe that 18 inches of growth that they've put on or more at this point, and you're taking that out of the equation. And so it's kind of like they're starting over, but you're not interrupting the bloom cycle at all because the blooms have not yet formed. So what you end up with on these later season things that bloom, and I don't know about you, but I think we're talking like late summer, early fall till my goldenrod gets kicking.
Yeah.
You end up with a plant that's going to be a little bit more compact and short, real stout. You're strengthening those stems because the longer those stems get with those heavy blooms, they're going to fall over. Or maybe it's just the case of you bought this fireworks goldenrod under the guise that it was going to get 20 inches tall, but in fact, just as per usual, the goldenrod didn't read the tag and it's getting 28 inches.
Yeah.
And
I hate when plants don't read their tags.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, I don't like an illiterate plant.
I don't either.
I fight for plant literacy. We need to make some stickers that say that.
Hey, that's an idea.
Some Shrubby Buddy stickers?
Yeah. I stand for plant literacy, or I fight for.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting off here.
We'll get a little tangent there, but
yeah.
But Matt mentioned goldenrods, and there's actually a good handful. I mean, there's probably tons, but there's a good handful of pretty popular plants that are in that category, including asters, Heliopsis, Helianthus, mums, Helenium's a good one. So those are all plants that bloom pretty late, and if you cut them back, you can get a more stout bloom later
more
in the
compact
season.
plant.
Mm-hmm.
I know they do that a lot with like mum or like aster production. to get some of those. I mean, there's cultivars now that stay pretty tight and meatball looking, but they will go in and pinch those blooms back. So to force them to bloom a little bit later even, or, they'll pinch, not the blooms, pinch the plant back or blooms. And it just creates kind of a more dense, compact plant, for the fall. So that they just look nice and tidy when they're sitting on your front porch for fall.
And fair warning, you can't do this with everything.
No.
Especially things that are forming flower buds now. You may not see the flower buds, but they might be forming within the tips of those branches. And if you do this with the wrong plant, your blooms are gone.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth the research, or perhaps a good opportunity for a question for the Shrubby Buddies podcast that we could answer right here on the podcast.
Yeah, if there's something that you have in mind that we haven't mentioned that, I wonder if that would work on, whatever the plant may be, feel free to reach out to us and ask us that. And, we can answer that through Instagram. We can answer and on here. We might, either one or both.
And what's great about plants, too, is they're resilient. So if you did cut something back that you were worried about getting too floppy and it didn't bloom, guess what? It'll be back next year, and you can have at it again.
Yeah.
That's one thing I love.
It's the resilience.
The
learning curve.
It's kind of a little trial and error sometimes.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. So shearing some of these plants back to strengthen them up, and just make them a more compact and tight plant for the later season, mid to late summer, going into fall. But there's a lot of stuff now too that has bloomed. That maybe the blooms aren't looking fantastic in the garden now, like the spent flowers. Maybe the plant's starting to look a little tired for whatever reason. Maybe it's something that you don't want seeding around in the garden if you don't want that natural, that supernaturalistic look to where, the plants are just allowed to do what they want to do. Personally, I kind of like that look. I kind of like the chaotic look. But it's not for everybody. I understand that. So if you want that more prim and proper, where everything's a little bit more controlled, now would be the time to get out and take care of some of those earlier season plants. So
and all those things that reseed, again, if you want to let them reseed and it be a little more wild looking, that's great. But often the plants that reseed, they're often more vigorous plants as well. So they're not only vigorous in their growth, but they're vigorous in their seedling growth. And eventually, the things that are reseeding might overtake the other things in your garden. So I know I'm at a point with my penstemon at home where we've let it reseed a little, and I'm done letting it reseed. So as soon as those flowers disappear in the next week or so, I'm cutting those off. I'm going to take those flower stalks down to the nicest looking foliage and try to cut down on that seed bank, because
the penstemon is one that will seed all over.
They have a big footprint, and if you let those seedlings grow up, everything around there might get choked out. So that's an example of one that I'm going to deadhead this year that I haven't in the past.
Yeah, penstemon's a good one. I found it. It seeds all over the place. In my front garden at home, am probably going to take my penstemon seed heads down when it's done flowering this year also, just so that I don't have that issue moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot, your front yard, which we've showed pictures of, where you kind of want to keep that penstemon where it's at.
You
don't necessarily want it in other places.
Correct.
But there are plenty of opportunities where in a garden where you may want that penstemon to go other places, and that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the other ones too, like one that I always do, not so much for the reseeding factor, but more for just the, just really I think makes the plant look so much better, is like your nepidas. We'll just say like Walker's Low, Catmint, the one that everyone plants. It's at every big box store, every nursery, it seems like in our area at least.
And Nepeta comes in tons of cultivars, oftentimes cat-themed. There's the Persian blue.
And kitten around,
which is a little one.
Yeah, so it's fun. It's a nice plant. Blooms early in the year. It's super vigorous. Puts on a lot of growth fast. So when those flowers are done, it doesn't look fantastic anymore. Kind of looks muddy or dirty. Still has that nice kind of steel blue foliage. But I will go in with the cat mints and just shear them down to the ground.
To the ground.
Literally take them down to the ground. And I don't think... I'm thinking I'm about a week away from that. I'm getting pretty close.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it, though. It's on my radar.
I almost did it the other day at home, and I was like, they still look pretty good. I'm trying to get ahead of myself.
Yeah. So it's on my radar. Probably by the next week or two, I'll go in and do that. And they do look kind of crummy right at first, but like I said a minute ago, they're such a vigorous plant. You cut those things back, and in a week or two's time, you just have this beautiful, fresh...
less than that.
Yeah.
It's almost
plant.
overnight sometimes.
Yeah, and it's not going to bloom as it did, in, say, late April, early May. You're not going to get that intense, the whole entire plant covered with these bright purple flowers, violet flowers, but you'll still get, some sporadic blooming on it.
Yeah.
But it just really makes the foliage look nice for the rest of the year.
And if you're getting a long season of growth,
you could do it twice.
You could do that a couple times.
Absolutely, you could do it now and then again in late summer and just have a whole new, fresh plant for the fall.
And you may not get quite as many blooms as the first, but you're still going to get a lot of blooms compared to a lot of the plants that claim they rebloom. Like salvia is an example of one that you can deadhead or cut all the way back, and it will really sporadically rebloom a flower stalk here and there. But I think you'll still get quite a bit with the Nepeta compared to something
comparatively.
like the salvia.
Yeah, you will with the salvia. You will get some reblooming, but not like you did on that first flower of the year, which is okay because it's allowed to be that way. You'll have plenty of other things in the garden that will steal the show, but salvia is another good one for deadheading. I just went through and deadheaded some salvia last week.
Yes, you did, and I already noticed that there's some blooms in there that were hiding that are starting to pop up, and it's not as striking as it was a couple of weeks ago, but it looks much better than it did.
Yeah.
Than before you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would agree. So,
I know right where you're talking about.
Yeah, so salvia, the catmint or Nepeta, Bernera would be one. So Bernera is one of those, or Siberian bug gloss is one of those plants that shade plant with a really pretty, heart-shaped leaf, kind of fuzzy foliage, silver variegation. Blooms early in the spring, and it just gets covered with these small blue flowers that they look neon because everything else is still kind of dull.
I believe we talked about this quite a bit in episode one.
Yeah, we did. So with the Bernera, it's done blooming now, and to me now the show is the foliage. It's going to start. Those leaves are going to start getting big. It's go in and deadhead it now and just get those spent flowers out of they're not... I personally haven't really had Bernera seed around in the garden.
No, not unless it reverts. If it reverts from those variegated forms, then it can go crazy, so you got to keep an eye on that. But those variegated forms aren't reseeding. Yeah, so you might as well just take a few minutes and go in and get rid of some of the seed heads, or the spent flowers. And just for aesthetics alone, just like you said, just not letting something cover up those beautiful leaves.
Yeah.
So just getting in there and just taking those flower stalks back underneath the leaves, so you don't have... You don't want to cut them high because you'll be left with
little dead sticks,
little stubs everywhere. You take them back underneath those leaves. It's not a lot of work.
No, it really
is.
Get
in there and do it.
You just get in there and do it. Yeah, I agree. Not a whole lot of work, and it just kind of transforms the plant, in my opinion, and makes it just look so much neater and cleaner.
Yeah, and just for the record, for our listeners out there, we're talking about an early season cleanup here. Matt and I we're on the same page about this, but once we get into fall and then into winter, we leave our perennials up for the most part. There's a few that we will take back for one reason or another, and we'll have episodes on that. But I don't want you to think, oh, Matt and Tim just want to cut everything back just for everything to look tidy. That's actually not the case. This is that first cutback. Everything we're taking back is going to shoot back up in one way or another, and there's just some things that you have to do now for the longevity of your garden.
Yeah, and also we may like leaving everything up through the wintertime for various reasons that we'll discuss at some point, probably later this year as we get closer to that season. But not everybody does, not everybody wants this wild, supernaturalistic looking garden. Some people want it to look tidy, and, so maybe we're not speaking to everyone right now, but for those that want a tidier looking garden and things to look a little bit more manicured, or maybe gardening and being out in the garden is therapeutic for some. It is for me. It's just a chance to, maybe throw some headphones on, throw on some good music, throw on a Shrubby Buddies podcast, and go out and deadhead some of these flowers. Do it in the last hour of the day is the sun setting and it's a little cool out and you're not out in the baking sun, and maybe you just finished, eating supper and stuff. So, a lot of that, that's kind of how I do it. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
Me too.
Another one that I like to cut back, maybe not necessarily right now. This one may be a little bit later in the year, or now, but geranium. With some of your geraniums, as they start to get a little leggy and they're kind of done flowering, most of them will flower pretty solid through the year. Don't be afraid on that one either to really kind of pull that plant up off the ground and give it a good shearing back and promote some new growth on it, and maybe some new flowers and stuff. So
I think Roseanne.
Yeah, Roseanne would be one.
Is a big one that I think benefits really well from a shear.
Yeah. The Roseanne can sometimes get pretty large and leggy and really kind of creep around and find its way into areas of your garden. And I like it for that reason. But to kind of create a more compact and tidier looking plant, you can just literally grab that thing, pull it up like you're putting it in a bun, and just give it a big haircut,
Yeah, and it'll still, after it comes back, it'll still creep back through your garden.
Yeah.
But you're tidying it up a bit,
Yeah, and slowing that process down some. So, yeah, so some of the geraniums, that, would be another good one. And we used Roseanne geranium as an example of one. So, yeah,
So, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. A lot of this...
Or beer holder.
Nom, nom, nom. A lot of this is subjective, but things that I think just look ugly after this first flush of growth this time of year, that I like to cut back in my garden, are something like an iris.
Or a peony.
Correct. Or spent bulb foliage like daffodils or tulips. And so I think this is another reason why you want to get out there and just kind of cut away some of that stuff that might be detracting from the beauty of your garden. And again, it's all subjective. You may really like the look of seed heads protruding up above an iris. And I'm looking at you. You might like that too, Matt. I don't know. I don't like it.
No, not on the irises. I don't.
Yeah, it's kind of like they turn this dark brown after they bloom, the seed heads, and I don't know, just they look dirty,
Yeah,
yucky.
they look yucky.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, and those are such easy ones. You can almost just go in and snap them off. You don't even have to. You don't even have to have any specialized pruners or anything. You can break them off, and again, I don't even think iris foliage is that pretty, but sometimes there's a variegated one that helps. But it's like just like a big wide blade of grass. But certainly once you add those seed heads, I'm not a huge fan personally. So
beautiful when they're flowering though. Iris, you mentioned bulbs, so like tulips, daffodils, you'll hear people talk about like you can't cut back your daffodil bulbs foliage yet, or they won't flower next year because they need all that energy. You got to braid them and put them in a ball and
wait till they turn yellow and brown.
And that's if you live and die by that, that's fine. Me personally, I've already cut all of mine back, and I did probably a couple of weeks ago. And guess what? I do that every year, and guess what?
They come back.
The daffodils come back every single year.
Yeah.
Never had an issue with it.
We're not suggesting that as soon as they're done blooming, you just take them back to the ground. But let's face it, folks. Daffodils were blooming like back in March and early April, and it's time. It's time to get rid of that stuff. And I'll bet my bottom dollar they'll be back.
They will be back. They haven't failed me yet.
No.
And, with tulips, same scenario. I know tulips require probably more energy to flower than the daffodils do. But I'll be honest with you, personally, in all of the gardens that I've planted and used tulips in, like, my damn tulips don't last much longer than 3 years regardless of how I treat them. They just are not consistent enough. Year one, fantastic. Mm-hmm. Year two, maybe 50% of them come back. And I could leave that foliage up all season long. Chances are a deer is going to find them, or a squirrel's going to dig them up, or a chipmunk or something. And also tulips, the life of them is just not real long. I would say 3 to 5 years probably, which is why a lot of these places where you see these big, beautiful, grand tulip displays are planting them as annuals, putting the bulbs in the ground, they flower the next year, and then boom, every one of them gets pulled out of the ground.
I can't think of we have a lot of tulip displays around us in Ohio, and I can't think of a single one that treats those like perennials. They after they bloom, they go bye-bye, and next year they start over, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I will welcome any tulip that does come back from year to year because the flower is wonderful, but I'm not going to lose sleep over cutting that foliage back a little early to make my garden look better, with the thought of will it or will it not come back next year after doing so. Mm. Again, if you want to leave it up all year long, that's perfectly fine. It's your garden. Do what you want to do. This is just Tim and I talking about our experiences and kind of how we handle things, or maybe you're unsure on the fence about if I do cut it back, will it come back next year? So, so some of your bulbs, it's time to start taking care of those.
And finally, in this category, peonies, I think, we're trying to go with plants today that most of you have in your gardens, and I feel like peonies have had such a resurgence in popularity.
The old grandma plant.
Yeah, I know. I remember coming up. I remember back when I was banging.
When was that?
That's just trying to be like Common Man. Anyways, back when I was banging, peonies were like the grandma plant. Like, oh, what do you want, that mildewy thing? And that's what grandmas plant. But now,
old 98-year-old Brenna just crocheting out there with her silly goose
and her
loosey goosey and her penny bush.
But those things, I'm telling you, they've gained a lot of popularity.
Yeah,
even with myself, I just find myself they're a very one season plant, but their one season just really hits.
Yeah,
it really does. So
it does hit.
That is not what we're talking about today, but what we're talking about is they are done blooming. The peonies are done blooming for most everybody listening here, and those can be cleaned up really well too. I wouldn't take those back to the ground because they still provide a nice mass of green foliage.
Yeah, like a shrub.
But any a lot of peonies, especially if water gets on the leaves or they're in a little bit of shade, they will get some mildew issues. And cutting off some of that extra stuff can be very helpful in alleviating some of that. So taking those flower stalks down, taking away any kind of tired, ragged foliage that's just because, they've been leafed out for quite a while now. They've been through a lot. So cleaning those up really makes them come back to life a little bit with that nice dark green foliage and a nice backdrop for your little perennials that are doing their thing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Peony's a good one. And I just, as we were talking here, just really quick, I thought of one more perennial that I do it on because it will reseed around. And then we'll try and get some stuff wrapped up here. Is hellebores. Flowered back in February, March. And they're done flowering now. And now would be a good time to kind of go in and clean up some of that foliage. Maybe you didn't get to the foliage from last year that's kind of dead around the base of the plant, or brown and green and just not looking great. Clean some of that up. Hellebores will reseed though. So if you don't want that in your garden, going in now and deadheading them off would be a good idea, just to kind of clean those plants up some for the rest of the year. They're not going to do anything regardless the rest of the year, but grow, for next year.
That's another plant that's become really popular, and people are probably listening like, oh, my hellebore's going to reseed?
Yeah, hellebores are Lenten rose.
And a lot of people are like, no, I'm leaving those, and that's fine. If you want it to reseed.
Yeah, and maybe some of the newer ones don't reseed as much. I know some of the older cultivars, though, really do. And will reseed a lot.
And I don't know if the seedlings come true to the parent plant. That's a good question that I might have to look into, but definitely help, because you might, like Matt said, you may have missed the cleanup on the growth from, not the growth from this past spring, but from last year altogether. And taking that stuff off really makes the plant look a lot better.
Makes it look a lot better, and it really allows it to push out some nice new foliage.
Exactly.
So cool. I think that about wraps it up on perennials and stuff. We can just touch real quick and lightly on maybe a couple of shrubs that are done blooming, like your lilacs and forsythias and things. If you've got shrubs that have finished blooming, now would be a good time to prune them. Don't touch your hydrangeas or anything like that. Stuff that is fixing to this finna. Stuff that's finna bloom here soon this summer.
To add finna to our vocabulary.
Little finna. So anything that's fixing to bloom, don't touch it. But, if it's some of that early season stuff, you can go ahead and do it now.
That stuff that bloomed on the old wood from last year. Yeah. So like lilacs and forsythia that just blooms straight away at the beginning of spring, those should have been pruned immediately after flowering or up until now. I think you're still good. So you get that question a lot, and I think we'll have to do a couple episodes dedicated to pruning shrubs, because there's a whole lot that goes into that with old things that bloom on old wood versus new wood.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think the most popular question is, when do I prune my hydrangeas?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different hydrangeas, and that answer varies from situation to situation, but I do think lilac is a very popular plant, and they're one of those. They're pretty vigorous, and they can grow pretty quick. And some people, they want to take them down quite a bit, but they don't want to interrupt the blooming. Now would be a good time, post-bloom, to get your lilacs to the size you want them and not interrupt the blooming for next year.
Yeah. So. And also, one last note on the pruning, if you have Cleveland pear or Bradford pear in your yard, it's done flowering, so now's a good time to take a chainsaw and just prune it off right at the base, right at ground level, and just get rid of that tree altogether.
Yeah, great time for a basil prune on a calorie pear.
Yep, let's get rid of those calorie pears and get something better in there. So
I like that. That was a little fun surprise you injected.
Yeah. So so that's kind of wrapping it up for this week's episode. last chance to get stuff in your garden. Don't wait too long. Otherwise, you'll be watering the hell out of it all summer long. So yeah, kind of be thinking about that.
Yeah, if you're like me and you have like little pots of this and pots of that sitting around and you haven't yet got it in the ground, get it in the ground, because you'll be sorry if you wait till the middle of July and then, 5 minutes after you plant and water something, it's already wilting down from the heat and the drought.
Yeah, get it in the ground now. Let it start growing its roots a little bit. You're gonna have to water it regardless. And watering, the watering needs of all of these plants, newly planted stuff, is going to start to increase as we get into the latter part of June and into July and August, our traditional hot, dry months in the Midwest. So we've been fortunate to have good rains and timely rains so far this spring and coming into the early part of the mid-season.
Where we're at,
yeah, not speaking for everyone, but yeah. So that. History has shown that it's going to start getting hot and dry. So get that stuff in the ground. Oh, look, we got a buck deer, something creeping out there. Kyle would owe us a milkshake right now.
Yeah, he would.
For seeing this deer.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably coming because it heard that we were broadcasting live from the Ohio Prairie Farmers prairies, and he wanted to come watch, And also, I love Gary's barn owl box right here. I hope he gets an owl in it someday.
Yeah, me too.
So,
me too.
Yeah, cool. So that kind of wraps it up for this week, I would say. Yeah, don't forget, follow us on Instagram. If you got any questions, feel free to ask away on Instagram. Yeah. Otherwise, I hope everyone is having and going to have a great week.
Yeah, get out and do a little intervention on that garden. It needs it.
And send us some pics of your garden on the gram. We would love to see them. Maybe a little perennial planting you did. We'd love to see it. As we're coming into.
Maybe we'll do a little repost.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Send us some pics and we'll repost them on the page. So, yeah, perfect. So until next time, everybody. Thanks for listening. I'm Matt. Join with Tim, and we out.
Keep your gardens wet.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Love you. Bye. Harder plus two. Bye.